There's a moment, and maybe you've had it, when you're watching something with a kid and they ask for a toy, a specific toy, and you say, "Wait, where did you see that?" And they say, "On a show." But it wasn't a show. It was a YouTube video made by the toy company, or a video made by someone paid by the toy company, or maybe even more odd, a video made by someone who genuinely loves the toy and wasn't paid at all. But their video is indistinguishable from the paid ones, which means your child has no way to know the difference, and honestly, neither do you. And standing there, you might realize something has shifted. Now, we grew up knowing what a commercial was. It interrupted the show. It had different energy, a different look. Your parents could point at the screen and say, "That's an ad. They're trying to sell you something." The categories are clear. Your child is growing up in a world where categories have dissolved. Not because anyone's lying, the paid promotions are technically labeled somewhere in text that it's so hard to read, but because the entire environment has been redesigned so that the boundary between content and sales pitch no longer matters. This episode is about that dissolution. Not in the future, it's happening now. I'm going to argue that most of us are operating with an understanding of advertising that's roughly 20 years out of date. That the bargain we think we've struck, I tolerate some ads in exchange for free stuff, or I pay money to escape ads, that no longer describes reality. That advertising has colonized spaces we thought were exempt, erased distinctions we thought were clear, and restructured incentives in ways we haven't fully understood. And I'm going to argue that this matters for your life, not as a political issue or an abstract concern, but as a daily reality that shapes what you see, what you buy, what you believe, and maybe what you think. Let's start with what most thoughtful people believe. The story we tell ourselves about advertising goes something like this. Companies advertise to sell products. That has always been true and always will be true. Advertising is how things get paid for. Google, Facebook, network television, the bargain is transparent and consistent. I watch or listen to something in exchange for something that's free. I encounter messages trying to sell me things. If I pay for a service, I expect fewer or no ads. I've opted out of the bargain. I'm paying with money instead of attention. Now, this model has three fundamental pillars. First, advertising is demarcated. You know when you're watching an ad because it interrupts the content. It sits in a sidebar, it announces itself with a logo or a jingle. We'll be right back. The FTC requires disclosure. The categories are visible. Second, advertising is proportional. More valuable content earns the right to interrupt you more, but there are understood limits. 30 seconds of commercials per 5 minutes of YouTube video. A few pages of ads per magazine. The ratio feels negotiated even if you never sat at the table. And third, advertising is optional. There is an exit ramp. Pay for the premium tier, subscribe to the ad-free version. Buy the product instead of using the free trial. Money purchases escape. These assumptions feel true because they were true for decades. Commercial breaks on television arrived at predictable interviews. Magazine ads occupied distinct pages from articles. Billboards stayed outside on highways, not inside your pocket. The line between editorial and advertisement was policed, imperfectly, but policed. When a DJ was paid to play a song without disclosing it, that was a scandal. It had a name, payola. The cultural narrative reinforced this understanding. Advertising was annoying but tolerable, a tax on free services, something you could tune out or pay to escape. Consumer choice offered an exit. If you hold this view, you are not naive. You're describing a system that genuinely worked this way until now. Parents could teach children to recognize commercials because commercials were recognizable. The social contract around advertising had terms, and mostly those terms held. The question is whether they still do. Let's look at the numbers. In 2024, global advertising revenue overtook revenue generated from consumer spending. That's huge. Advertising spending is now growing more than 3 times as fast as consumer spending, 6% annually versus 2%. Global marketeers spent close to $1.1 trillion on ads last year. That's trillion with a T. So, put this in human terms, marketers now spend an average of $140 per person globally on advertising. In the United States, it's $1,246 per person. That's every man, woman, and child, including newborns, including people who think they've opted out, including you. This isn't the free things need to be paid for somehow model. This is an economic restructuring. Selling access to your attention has become more valuable than selling you things. But scale alone doesn't challenge the common understanding. Let me show you what does. Let's start with streaming. Netflix launched in 2007 with a simple promise: watch what you want, when you want, without commercials. That was the pitch. That was why people left cable. No ads was the product. In 2022, Netflix introduced an ad-supported tier. By 2025, 45% of US Netflix households watch on that advertising tier. The service that promised to rescue us from commercials now derives growing revenue from showing them. But Netflix at least lets you choose. You can pay more for ad-free. Amazon doesn't. In January of 2024, Amazon Prime Video started showing ads to all Prime subscribers, including me. You were already paying $139 a year for Prime. One morning, ads appeared. If you wanted them gone, that was $3 more a month. But you had to opt out of something you never opted into. Amazon's ad-supported Prime Video now reaches 315 million monthly viewers. The company's advertising revenue hit $17.7 billion in a single quarter of 2025, up 24% from the year before. And Amazon executives have told the press that ad loads will ramp up a little bit going forward. You might think, fine, I'll pay the $3. I'll get the premium tier. There's an exit ramp. But here's what the common misunderstanding misses. The exit ramp is being dismantled. More than half of new Netflix subscribers in markets with the ad tier choose the ad-supported option. Not because they want ads, because it's cheaper and it's presented first. The ad-free experience is becoming premium positioning, not the baseline. Paying for content without ads is starting to feel like paying for a first-class ticket. It's available, but not how the system is designed to work for most people. The bargain has inverted now. Free with ads used to be the compromise. Now paid with ads is normal, and paid without ads is a luxury surcharge. So, let's talk about shopping. When you search for a product at Amazon, what do you see? Well, you see results. They look like search results. They're organized like search results. Your brain processes them as, here's what matches my search. But the first several results are almost certainly ads. Sponsored placements. Brands paid for that position. The quote, organic results, the ones Amazon's algorithm determined were most relevant to your search, are pushed further down the page, sometimes below the fold, sometimes onto the second page. This is called retail media, and it's becoming one of the fastest growing sectors in advertising. Retail media networks are platforms operated by retailers, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Kroger, that allow brands to advertise on the retailer's own properties. When you search for batteries on Amazon, battery companies bid for the right to appear first. When you browse the Walmart app, product placement is for sale. Retail media revenue grew by more than $10 billion in 2023 alone, reaching nearly $120 billion globally. That's only 1 year's growth. And here's the number that explains why. Retail profit margins are thin, 3 to 4% typically. The margin on advertising believe it or not, is 70 to 90%. Walmart's retail media network is responsible for 12% of the company's profits. 12%. Walmart has discovered that selling access to you is more profitable than selling products to you. That restructures what a store is. Walmart now uses approximately 170,000 digital screens in its stores, on self-checkout machines, at the end of aisles, above the pharmacy counter. Those screens are advertising inventory. The checkout counter is no longer where you pay, it's where your attention is sold. When you walk through a modern retail environment, you're not just shopping, you're moving through an ad platform that happens to stock merchandise. Now, let's talk about transportation. Since formally launching its advertising division in late 2022, Uber has built a business reaching riders at what the company calls, quote, high value moments. Funny, right? Uber's ad business surpassed $1.5 billion annual run rate by early 2025, up 60% from the year before. Uber serves ads in the app, in rider emails, on car top displays, and on in-car tablets. Uber's deal with T-Mobile expanded its inventory to more than 50,000 vehicles with screens in the backseat. The company has introduced what it calls ride offers. Brands can sponsor discounts on your next trip in exchange for your attention. A coupon tied to an ad, turning the idle moment of waiting for your car into promotional inventory. This is transportation as advertising platform. The minutes between requesting a car and arriving at your destination are no longer dead time. They're monetized time. But Uber at least tells you it's advertising. The screens announce themselves. The sponsored offers are labeled. What about when advertising doesn't announce itself at all? You follow someone on Instagram. She reviews skincare products. She's knowledgeable, enthusiastic, relatable. You've bought things based on her recommendations. Sometimes her posts say paid partnership at the top. Sometimes they say hashtag ad. Sometimes they don't say anything. Here's what the research tells us. It doesn't matter. Fewer than 1 in 10 people can recognize native advertising. Content paid for by brands, but designed to resemble organic content, even when it's labeled. Studies tested this directly. They show people labeled sponsored content and ask, is this an advertisement? 90% said no. The labels exist. They're required by the FTC. But they've been designed for a legal environment, not a cognitive one. They satisfy regulatory requirements while failing to actually inform anyone. 4 out of 5 social media influencers still fail to properly disclose paid partnerships. The FTC put 670 companies on notice in 2023 and returned $337 million to consumers through enforcement in 2024. These sound like big numbers, but they're rounding errors against a $1 trillion industry. But it gets worse. An influencer posts a negative review of a product. Authentically, she tried it, didn't like it, said so. A competing brand now reaches out to her. They want to pay her to make a video criticizing the same product, the one she already criticized, for free. If she takes the money, her authentic opinion becomes legally an advertisement. The same words, the same product, the same genuine belief. But now it requires disclosure because money changed hands. And her followers? They liked her negative review. They trust her judgment. If she makes the paid video, it will look exactly like her organic content, saying exactly what she already believes, and technically be an advertisement. The disclosure system assumes authentic and paid are different things. What happens when they're the same thing? Here's a story about someone we'll call David. He's 38, runs a specialty coffee roastery, online store, one physical location. He's been in business for 6 years. David advertises on Google, Amazon, and Meta. He understands the advertising ecosystem. He's a buyer, not only a target. His business depends on appearing in Amazon search results when someone searches for specialty coffee. So he pays for sponsored placement. His competitors do the same. The result is a bidding war that pushes the organic results further down. David is paying Amazon to be visible on Amazon to customers who came to Amazon specifically to shop, not to be advertised to. 5 years ago, advertising consumed about 8% of his revenue. Now it's 18%. But here's what changed his understanding of the system. David has wholesale accounts, coffee shops he supplies. They order through Amazon Business, steady accounts, relationships he built himself. He discovered that his wholesale customers logged into Amazon to reorder his coffee. They were seeing ads for his competitors. Amazon's retail media network was using his customer relationships, people who had already chosen his product, to sell access to brands that wanted to poach them. David is now paying to protect customers he acquired independently. The advertising ecosystem he depends on is also competing with him. The more he succeeds, the more valuable his customers become to everyone except him. Here's the thing, he was a customer of these platforms. He's come to understand he's both the product and the mark. So why is this happening? Why has advertising expanded into streaming, retail, transportation, and the previously invisible spaces of daily life? It's an emergent property of several interlocking forces. The first force is the slowdown in consumer revenue. Companies across sectors have discovered that consumers resist paying more. Real wages are stagnant or growing slowly. Economic uncertainty makes people price sensitive. When you can't raise prices, you need to find other buyers. And the other buyers are advertisers. The second force is the maturation of the attention economy. Every company with a screen or a moment when someone is waiting has realized it's sitting on inventory. The gas pump, the elevator, the Uber backseat, the checkout kiosk. These were dead spaces. Now they're monetizable. The term, quote, attention economy used to sound academic. Now, it's the common model. If you have access to eyeballs, you have something to sell. The third force is the ascendancy of first-party data. For years, advertising ran on third-party cookies, bits of code that track you across websites. That system is dying. Privacy regulations have tightened. Apple lets you block tracking. Browsers are phasing cookies out. But companies that have direct relationships with you, retailers, streaming services, ride-sharing apps, have something more valuable. First-party data. They know what you bought, what you watched, where you went. The data doesn't need cookies. It comes from the relationship itself. This explains the explosion of retail media. Amazon doesn't need to track you across the web. Amazon knows what you put in your cart. The fourth force is margin pressure. Retail media networks 60 to 70% profit margins. Traditional retail runs on 3 to 5%. A grocery store that sells the cereal company the opportunity to reach you makes dollars. If you're a Walmart executive, what do you optimize for? The 3-cent margin on the transaction or the 70-cent margin on the attention? The math is irresistible. Retailers are becoming advertising companies that happen to have stores. Here's what this produces in aggregate. In the 1970s, the average American encountered roughly 500 ads per day. Today, estimates range from 6,000 to 10,000. You can't process this volume. Your brain has adapted. The phenomenon is called banner blindness. The majority of internet users have developed what researchers describe as, quote, subconscious abilities to overlook digital advertising. Your visual system literally stops registering certain patterns. This sounds like victory. Your brain is defending itself. But the advertising industry has noticed. The response isn't fewer ads, it's different ads. Native advertising, influencer content, product placement, sponsored search results. Formats designed to bypass the filters your brain has built. Dr. Gloria Mark, a researcher at UC Irvine, has documented what constant media switching does to cognition. Multitasking, she found, represents cognitive failure, not efficiency. The brain cannot perform two effortful tasks simultaneously. What it does instead is switch rapidly between them with costs at each transition: increased stress, reduced retention, impaired judgment. The advertising environment trains this kind of fragmented attention, then it exploits it. Digital fatigue, researchers have found, significantly impairs consumers' ability to process marketing information. It also increases impulsive purchasing and avoidance based decisions. The people most saturated with ads are also the least able to evaluate them. This creates an arms race with no obvious end. Most advertising produces more filtering. More filtering produces less effective advertising. Less effective advertising produces pressure for new formats, new targeting, more integration into content, which eventually triggers new filtering, and around we go. Here's what I want you to consider. So far, we've been describing an expansion. Advertising has colonized new spaces, erased old boundaries, restructured economic incentives. The listener's response might be outrage or resignation or some mixture of both. But there's another possibility. This system might be collapsing under its own weight. The research on advertising effectiveness is increasingly grim for advertisers. Only 31% of people report responding to social media advertising. Engagement rates are collapsing across platforms. 67% of consumers report marketing fatigue. One analyst put it this way: traditional advertising approaches have reached mathematical impossibility. The inventory has expanded so much faster than attention that reaching anyone effectively requires ever increasing spending for ever diminishing returns. The streaming industry offers a preview. Cable television died partly from ad load creep. Networks kept adding commercials until some shows were nearly unwatchable, 16 minutes of ad per hour. Viewers fled to streaming specifically because streaming had fewer ads. Now, streaming is replicating the same pattern. As someone who watched the cable TV world effectively kill itself with expanding ad loads for years, one industry observer noted, it will not surprise me when streamers start to increase their ad loads. It will be to their detriment when they overdo it. Amazon executives have already announced plans to increase Prime Video ad loads. Netflix ad tier keeps growing. The pressure to monetize is structural. It doesn't respect the lessons of history. Meanwhile, consumer tolerance is not infinite. Research consistently shows that viewers have strong preferences for lower ad loads. No kidding. They notice when ads increase. At some threshold, which varies by person but exists for everyone, they stop watching, stop shopping, stop engaging. We may be approaching a systemic breaking point, not a crisis that arrives all at once, but a slow degradation that produces worse outcomes for everyone. Viewers who increasingly ignore ads, advertisers who increasingly waste money, platforms that increasingly fail to deliver value. The attention economy hasn't merely shifted, it may be breaking down. And the response so far: more data, more targeting, more embedded content might accelerate the breakdown rather than prevent it. So let me bring this back to your life. If you have a streaming subscription, there's a meaningful probability you're watching ads on a service you paid for. If you shop online, the search results you see are shaped by who paid to be seen, not just what's best or cheapest. If you follow influencers, you're receiving recommendations where, quote, authentic and sponsored have become nearly impossible to distinguish. You've developed defenses. Your brain filters advertising automatically. You skip, you scroll past, tune out. These defenses are real and they work partially, but they're also being engineered around. Every adaptation you make is studied. Every filter you develop is tested against. The most sophisticated advertising now doesn't look like advertising at all. It looks like search results, recommendations, organic content, the helpful interface of an app. Here's the question the common understanding can't answer. What would it mean to opt out of advertising? You could pay for premium tiers, but premium increasingly means fewer ads, not no ads. And paying for every service, streaming, music, news, email, would cost hundreds of dollars monthly that most households don't have. You could install ad blockers, but they don't work on native advertising, on retail media, on the sponsored search results that determine what products you see. They don't block the screens at the grocery store or the ads in your Uber. You could delete social media, cancel streaming, shop only in local stores, but you'd be constructing an alternative life that most people can't afford in time or money. And even then, the advertising would find you on billboards, in podcasts, in the background of public spaces. The exit ramp doesn't lead anywhere you can actually live. So, what do you do with this? I'm not going to tell you that advertising is evil, or that the system must be dismantled, or that you should unplug from everything. Those conclusions are available if you want them, but they're not mine to hand to you. What I'll offer instead is this: the bargain you thought you'd made, some ads for free content, payment to escape, no longer describes reality. The categories you learned as a child, show versus commercial, editorial versus advertisement, have collapsed in ways that are invisible unless you look carefully. The defenses you have built are real, but they're partial and they're being routed around as we speak. That doesn't mean you're helpless. It means the tools you have, skepticism, attention, choice, need to be recalibrated for a different game. When you search for a product, the results are advertising. Treat them accordingly. When you watch someone recommend something online, assume the possibility of payment even if none is disclosed. The disclosure system broken. When a system you pay for starts showing ads, that's not a glitch or a temporary measure. That's the business model revealing itself. When your attention is captured by a screen you didn't choose to engage with, at the gas pump, in the Uber, at the checkout, recognize that your attention has been sold without your participation. None of this requires anger. Anger is a reaction to betrayal, and there's no real betrayal here. Only a system operating according to its incentives. The advertisers are trying to reach you. The platforms are trying to monetize access. The investors are trying to generate returns. Everyone is playing their role. But you're also a participant, and participants benefit from understanding the game. Interconnected is written and produced by me, myself, and I. If this episode shifted how you see your daily world, consider sharing it with someone who might feel the same recognition. The best way to support the show is to leave a review wherever you listen. And until next time, keep seeking those patterns.